The first time it happened, I was standing in line at a bakery, staring at a tray of bread I couldn't afford. I remember thinking, very clearly, if I buy this, I won't have enough for bus fare. The thought was quiet, ordinary, the kind of thing everyone thinks and immediately forgets. The woman behind the counter looked up at me and said, gently, "You can take the smaller loaf. It's cheaper, and it still fills you up." I froze. I hadn't said anything out loud. I hadn't even moved my lips. I laughed it off, awkwardly, and assumed it was coincidence. Maybe my eyes had lingered too long on the price tag. Maybe my face gave me away. Humans are good at reading each other, I told myself. That's all this was. But then she added, "And don't worry about the bus. It's only a short walk today. The weather's kind." That was exactly what I'd been thinking. I paid quickly and left, my heart thudding too loudly for a quiet morning. Outside, I stood on the sidewalk with the warm loaf in my hands, telling myself not to be dramatic. People guess things all the time. Patterns, habits, expressions. Nothing mysterious. Nothing wrong. By evening, I wasn't so sure. At home, I lived alone in a small apartment that always smelled faintly of dust and old books. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, replaying the day. My thoughts felt louder than usual, like a radio turned up too high. I tried an experiment. I thought, I wonder if anyone can hear this right now. A knock came at my door. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I stood there for a long moment, my hand hovering near the handle, my breath shallow. Another knock, softer this time. When I opened the door, my neighbor Mrs. Alvarez stood there, holding a bowl covered with foil. She was in her late 60s, always wearing sweaters even in summer, her gray hair pinned neatly back. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said. "I just had this strange feeling you might be hungry." My mouth went dry. I'm fine." She smiled, kind and unembarrassed. "Maybe. But it never hurts to share food." She held out the bowl. "It's soup." I took it because refusing felt impossible. She didn't linger. Just nodded, wished me a good night, and shuffled back down the hall. I closed the door and leaned against it, sliding slowly to the floor. My thoughts were racing now, tumbling over each other in panic. This can't be happening. This isn't real. People can't hear thoughts. The next day confirmed that they could. At work, my boss answered questions I hadn't asked. My coworker apologized for a joke I'd only reacted to internally. A stranger on the street stepped aside before I even decided to change direction. Everywhere I went, my unspoken thoughts seemed to ripple outward, reaching people before I could stop them. By the end of the week, I was exhausted. Not physically, but mentally, as if I'd been shouting non-stop without rest. I stopped thinking in full sentences, tried to keep my mind blank. That only made things worse. The harder I tried not to think, the louder everything felt. Fear came next. Fear of being judged, of being exposed. Every selfish thought, every flash of anger, every unkind impulse, I imagined them spilling out of me like ink in water. I stopped leaving my apartment. Groceries were delivered. Messages went unanswered. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, counting my breaths. I told myself I was dangerous now. That my thoughts could hurt people. That it was safer to be alone. That's when the notes started appearing. The first was slipped under my door. Just a small piece of paper, folded in half. "You don't have to hide," it said. I crumpled it and threw it away, my chest tight. The next day, another note appeared. "We hear more than thoughts. We hear pain too." I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask who we were. I wanted it all to stop. On the third day, I opened my door and found Mrs. Alvarez standing there again. This time, she wasn't holding soup. She was holding a chair. "May I come in?" she asked. I hesitated, then stepped aside. She set the chair down in the middle of the room and sat, folding her hands in her lap. "You're scared," she said. I swallowed. "You can hear it." She nodded. "Not just me." I waited for anger, accusation, curiosity. Instead, she looked at me with something like relief. "You know," she said, "for years I've felt things from people. Sadness, mostly. Loneliness. I never understood why. I thought I was imagining it." My head snapped up. "You've had this before?" She smiled softly. "Not exactly this. But something like it. When it started happening to you, it got clearer. Louder. Like someone finally turned on the lights." I wrapped my arms around myself. "I don't want this. I didn't choose it." "Of course you didn't," she said. "No one chooses these things. But running from it won't make it kinder." "Kinder?" The word came out sharp. "You don't know what I think. The awful things. The selfish things." She leaned forward slightly. "We all think awful things. Thoughts aren't sins. They're weather. What matters is what you do with them." I looked away, tears blurring my vision. "I don't want to hurt anyone." "Then you won't," she said simply. "Because now, you know you're heard." After she left, I sat in silence for a long time. Her words stayed with me, settling slowly, like dust. The world hadn't become crueler because my thoughts were exposed. If anything, it had become gentler. I noticed it in small ways at first. When I thought about how tired I was, someone offered me a seat. When I worried about money, my paycheck came with an unexpected bonus. When I felt lonely, my phone rang. People weren't reacting to my worst thoughts. They were responding to my needs. One afternoon, I went back to the bakery. The same woman was there. When she saw me, she smiled. "Rough week?" she asked. I nodded. She slid an extra roll into my bag. "On the house." "Why?" I asked. She shrugged. "Because sometimes kindness is the right answer, even when you don't know the question." As days passed, I started to test something new. Instead of trying to silence my mind, I filled it deliberately. Gratitude. Hope. Small, intentional kindnesses directed outward like quiet prayers. "I hope he gets home safely. I wish she knew she did a good job. I'm glad you're here." The effects were subtle but real. Smiles lingered longer. Arguments softened before they began. Strangers met my eyes and nodded, as if reassured by something they couldn't name. It wasn't perfect. Some people recoiled, uncomfortable with the closeness of it all. Some were overwhelmed, their own emotions rising to the surface when they brushed against mine. I learned to be careful, to rest my mind when I could, to step back when the noise grew too loud. One evening, I sat on the apartment building's front steps, watching the sun sink behind the rooftops. Mrs. Alvarez joined me, lowering herself slowly beside me. "You're doing well," she said. "I'm still afraid," I admitted. She patted my hand. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing not to let fear decide." I thought about that long after she went inside. Months passed. The world adjusted. So did I. My thoughts weren't private anymore, but they weren't weapons either. They became bridges, fragile, imperfect, but real. Through them, I learned how deeply connected we already were, how often we carried the same quiet worries, the same unspoken hopes. One night, lying in bed, I thought, I hope this means something. I hope I'm doing some good. From somewhere down the hall, I heard laughter. Warm, genuine, unexpected. I smiled into the dark. For the first time since it began, I didn't wish for silence. I wished instead to be worthy of being heard.